A Simplex converted to a Great Western Railway Prairie Tank Part 32. Cleaning up the Smokebox saddle casting and completing the firehole door adapter using a minimum of machine tools. I'm having a close look at the fit between the Smokebox and the saddle. In case you're wondering why my scriber is stuck up in the air, no, it's not to poke me in the eye. I'm just using it to help my eye make sure that the Smokebox is in the right place. The first thing to do, I think, is to clean up the Smokebox. This has been very crudely machined, and in some places not really machined at all. All I'm doing at the moment is cleaning it up with a brass wire brush to see how bad it is. The radius of this saddle does not match the Smokebox, so I'm going to have to modify this. I cleaned up the Smokebox using my belt sander largely, and now you can really see where the part hasn't been machined. I intend to fill this casting with something like JB Weld and then rub it down so it looks really good before I even think about painting it. This job can ruin a model locomotive. If I get it wrong and the chimney is not vertical, then I have a problem. The engine will never look right. I'll cover the fitting of the Smokebox in another episode. For the moment, it's back to making the firehole door assembly. I'm currently trying to show some of the jobs that I do using an absolute minimum of machine tools. Okay, one or two of the parts I do need to use the machine tools for, but it's very important to hone your skills at handwork. Here I have a bit of a problem. A moment ago I showed how the hinge is in the wrong position, so I need to make a new hinge. I'm applying some marking out blue to this small piece of brass, and here I'm holding it in position so I can put the scriber through the hinge to make the mark for the hole. Over now to the bandsaw, and of course this is a machine tool. I could have used a hacksaw though, I suppose. I'm cutting out the shape of the hinge. This original part was a silver soldered fabrication. Once I'd cut the shape from the piece of brass for the hinge mount, I applied some marking out blue, scribed a line to the approximate shape, and trimmed it roughly to shape using the 1-inch belt sander. The finished shape was created with a needle file. Have you ever had one of those days? I'm having one this morning. Here I am trying to voice over this video, and I'm getting idiot phone calls, idiot emails, and people wanting to sell me things. But finally, despite that, I've got to this point of the voiceover, 2 minutes 35 in, after 1 hour. Once I'd shaped the hinge support, I drilled a couple of holes in it for these very small 10BA bolts. And now, with the help of some marking out blue and a scriber, I'm going to transfer the positions of these holes onto the main part. And the aim of this is to mark them correctly so I don't have to file the holes oval. So I also scribed a ruled line to help me find the dots. Then I drilled the holes in the main part and the hinge bracket fitted perfectly. I'm just using a nut spinner to tighten the nuts onto these small bolts. It's no good using a Barco spanner in this application. Once both the nuts were fitted, I cut off the excess thread using a pair of side cutters, or front cutters, whatever they're called. After this, using a needle file, I cleaned up the ends of the bolts. The hole that I originally drilled through the brass part was 3/32 of an inch, but I drilled it out a bit larger to match the 2 holes in the straps. Now it's time to make the latch that keeps the firehole door shut. This is a smaller piece of brass, and once again using the bandsaw, I cut it to the rough shape that I needed it to be. This is a new bandsaw blade, so it's cutting quite well. I should really have the blade guide a lot lower than it is, but for the purpose of the video, I've lifted it up. Things like this are good practice. I could just put this in the milling machine. I could have made everything that you've just seen me make very quickly using a milling machine. But what if you don't have one? What if your milling machine's broken? I'm simply trying to show some alternatives to machining. And when you see the finished product, you can judge for yourself as to whether it's good enough. I've drilled 2 holes in the main part, and these are clearance size to take 8BA bolts. Once I held the latch in place over the holes, I used a scriber to mark the position of the holes. Then I drilled the latch tapping size for 8BA bolts. Why didn't I use 10BA? Well, for me 10BA is just a little bit too small. I usually break the taps, but 8BA is okay. I used 10BA bolts for the hinge bracket because the tops of them are visible. But these 2 8BA bolts are not visible, so there can be 2 screws very close together. Then I ran into a bit of a snag. Once I fitted the completed part, I could not rotate the check valves back to their normal position. So I had to do a bit of careful reshaping of the part using my 1-inch belt sander, followed by polishing it up on the polishing spindle. I think I will also reduce the thickness of the top caps on the check valves. To keep the fire hole door in position, I've been using the twist drill that I drilled the hole with. Now I need to make a stainless steel pin to fit through the entire hinge. This is a very small part. It started off as a piece of 3/16 of an inch in diameter stainless steel. I centre drilled the end and pulled it out, put a live centre in place, fitted a live centre in the tailstock to allow me to turn the part. As you can see in this highly magnified image, as I'm turning, the metal is moving around quite a lot. This is the way of things. I'm actually running the lathe far too slowly, and it's often a good idea to use a fixed steady for when you're turning long shafts in the lathe. This after all is just a hinge pin, so it's not exactly a high tolerance part. Once I'd finished the diameter of the main shaft, I turned it round in the chuck and cleaned across the front of the head. And as always, the final job was to just touch the edge with a file, because as we all know, a 90-degree cut across a piece of metal is razor sharp. Well, I can't believe how long it's taken me to do this voiceover. It was just like a barrage of numpties on the phone, followed by a succession of emails from a man who was having difficulty with Patreon. In the end, I just gave up on him. But finally I got there. Here's the finished part. It's not painted yet and it looks a bit scabby, but it will be okay. And this concludes the episode. I'd just like to say stay healthy, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.